So, first of all, what is the attitude, point of view of the big news publishers towards working with Taboola, working through a paid solution? I mean, a number of the big publishers, CNN, Bloomberg, New York Times, have been using it for a while. It's not new at all. But how do they see the platform? How have their needs changed? And I know you guys are doing a lot with data in specific. So tell us a little bit about how the demands of the publishers have evolved and how you're responding.
Sure, it's a great question. So I think we see the space, content discovery, really as an evolving space. And there's always going to be a layer of editorial that's necessary. But when you think about its evolution from portals to search to email to social, they all kind of led what we think is to content discovery on the publisher's platform. And that's where the users are going directly to learn. And so I think most publishers see us as a vehicle to really enhance that experience. They're learning about a piece of content, and then there's more content that's suggested to them. And that content's very algorithmic in its nature, right? It's not necessarily relevant. It's not necessarily contextual. It's not necessarily time-based or even geo-based. It's a function of an algorithm that looks at all those things and tries to find the most interesting piece of content to every user when they're on that particular URL. And we define interesting as something that they click on, essentially. So it's very hard and fast, something with a high CTR, a piece of content with a high CTR on a particular item. If it's found to be successful, it will continue to be found successful by other users on that piece of content. So publishers originally saw us as a vehicle for that extension of learning. And now as we've developed more tools and their demands have grown, they're seeing that we can provide other value as well. And one example of that is what we call Newsroom. And this is an example that I think is relevant to brands and to publishers, essentially. It's a vehicle for them to look at the success metrics on their homepage or section front. And we've basically mapped the longitude, latitude of every item on their page. And obviously these are very dynamic environments. And look at it over a period of time. So we can basically tell if a particular news item is performing well compared to its benchmarks. And if it is, then it gives that insight to the publisher. Well, maybe we should do more with this news item. Maybe we should push it out socially. Maybe we should present it higher on the page. Conversely, if it's not, there are things that can be done. Should we A/B test new titles? Should we A/B test new images? Change its placement on the page. So it gives publishers a feedback loop to basically what users are in real time are looking for.
So all right, we just spoke to Craig about how they're using you guys as an internal device in a platform to serve within timing. Is that becoming more common with publishers using Taboola to sort of serve across pages, or are they using it to bring other content in? I mean, I know there's different pieces, but we're very interested in this internal use of the platform.
Sure. I mean, frankly, the internal use is how Taboola first started, and the idea was video content in particular at the time was hard to find and hard to find a match to a user. So actually the company spent the first 3 years really just trying to refine that process of finding the right pieces of video content that would be interesting to a user. And they focused on video because it was a hard nut to solve. There's not much metadata about video. And also because it was more valuable to drive users into video from a strategic and from a monetization point of view. Over time we've evolved, and we will recommend any kind of content on a publisher site. But I think at its core, what we really do is help publishers increase engagement on their site and expose their own users to their own content.
And tell us a little bit about the data that you guys can gather. First of all, I think it's important to just explain a little bit about the insights that Taboola has of users, where, like, if you're a publisher, if you're a Time Inc. or a New York Times, I mean, you know a lot about your users, but you guys know other stuff. So. And it's not just watch-related video, it's based on a particular user. So could you explain a little bit about, go a little bit deeper in terms of how you target specific content, and then also on the back end, how you report on the results impact of that consumption?
So it's an evolving space, I think, and we're getting better and more sophisticated at exposing more of these data insights to publishers and to the account managers. But I think one interesting insight we've recently started to expose to publishers is how referral-based information can have a really big impact on what users do on their site. So a user from weather or time or search or Facebook will all have different experiences on the destination site in terms of the user's click-through patterns, how long they stay on the site. And I think it gives publishers insights in terms of who they should be partnering with and where they should be buying media. And conversely, when they're partnering with these other publishers, we provided them with tools that will basically more effectively use RSS as a vehicle to drive traffic across these partner relationships. So there might be like non-cash relationships that a lot of publishers have. And instead of just using a simple RSS, we can basically apply the algorithm to these RSSs and really be more efficient about the use of every pixel on a publisher's site. And that's sort of what we're about, is just finding the most effective use of the real estate, so to speak.
And speaking of the real estate, the other side of the business is that you work with publishers by putting your widgets, those sort of collection of 6 or little thumbnails of content. How is that going? How do you work with individual publishers to make sure they have stuff that's relevant, that's editorially relevant, that works for them? How do you kind of decide how to sort of serve up, if you will, the widgets to the publishers, and then you guys share revenue with them?
Yes. So it's a process by which we really try to get a good understanding of what the publisher's goals are. And they can have a whole spectrum of goals. They could be very revenue focused or very focused on organic recirculation. And the algorithm is not necessarily a black box. I mean, certainly if you don't touch it, it's going to perform to its maximum capability in terms of being efficient and having a really high CTR or RPM. That being said, there are a lot of inputs that the publishers can make that will very much influence the type of content that users see, by vertical, by age of content. There's really a plethora of factors there that will ensure that they kind of get the visual experience that they're comfortable with.
And we just spoke to Craig about native advertising, and there's a ton of branded advertising. Again, kind of we're here in this ad agency, and what are the opportunities for brands to work with you guys as opposed to what had been traditionally publishers?
I mean, there's a plethora of opportunities. I think brands, as we all know, are publishing more and more. And some of the tools we just talked about aren't just relevant for traditional news organizations, but also for brands. I can easily imagine a newsroom product, living on top of Ford.com or living on top of any brand that's publishing content on their site, just to make sure that they're publishing the right content at the right time on their site.
And one last question for publishers. The notion of buying traffic has a sort of a mixed message or a mixed perception, and I guess the question is buying traffic just a make good, or is buying traffic building an audience or building a brand? And what do you tell how do you explain that to publishers or to brands?
Yeah. I mean, I think buying traffic is core to marketing, regardless if you do it on a billboard, on TV, online, in search. So I don't think it's a 4-letter word. I think this is core to what most brands and marketers are doing these days to ensure that they not only create their own narrative about their brand, but they control where that narrative appears. And that's crucial. And that's why it's so important that we've got these relationships with really top-tier publishers, so brands can ensure that they're in an environment that is where the audience is great, they're knowledge hungry. It's a different. I think in our case, it's actually a much more friendly audience than other types of media, which might just be kind of random.